Hi, I'm Tom Scioli, author of I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design. Welcome to THORsday Comics. Today we're talking about another issue of one of Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's great co-creations, The Mighty Thor. Nothing you have ever seen before can equal the breathtaking spectacle of giants walk the earth. And yeah, I've got to agree, this is like a real blockbuster. This is something that you didn't really see in comics, you didn't really see in the movies up until, the past couple decades. But yeah, you have a sort of, mythic god superhero fighting evil giant gods on the streets of New York. It's, there were giant monster stories, there were superhero stories, but nothing quite like this. The story, the fight is sort of carried out with like a real sense of urgency and menace, and where the battle gets to play out. It's not just sort of, a one or two panel thing. It's not sort of alluded to. It is the bulk of the story. Like it's, you didn't really get that in Superman or any of the other superhero stories where, you'd see, something like this and played straight. It wasn't a goof. They don't talk down to the readership. They give it a respect. And so here we go. So yeah, I mean, this is, one of the old Thor comics that I own. I'm happy to own, and it's in pretty nice condition, and it's just the definitive way to read these stories if you're able to. The Mighty Thor, giants walk the earth. So we get one of these, pretty nice symbolic composition where you have, that the heads of the various players of the story, the various characters along the arc of Thor's swinging hammer, and you got Thor right at the center of it. Great perspective. One of the big lessons that other artists took from Kirby was just this, exaggerated perspective. This is a tale so powerful in concept, so dramatic in scope, that only the inspired talent of Stan Lee could have written it. Only the gifted hand of Jack Kirby could have illustrated it. As grandiose as that credit box is, it still underplays Jack Kirby's role in this, that Jack Kirby was very much a co-writer of this story, very likely the dominant co-writer of it. The term illustrator or illustration, like it sounds very fancy and very, very respectable, like a, much better than saying, Jack Kirby drew it or he penciled it. To say he illustrated it, is very, sort of grandiose and congratulatory, but it also undersells it. It makes it sound as if, Stan Lee came up with this story, this complete story, soup to nuts, and Jack Kirby just kind of drew these, very beautiful pictures that accompany this story, that Jack Kirby sort of, comes in after the fact, after the story's already been created, and creates illustrations to sort of buttress this already existing story, and that's just not the case. Kirby is there from day one, possibly, working on this story before Stan even comes into the picture. Inked by Chick Stone, lettered by S. Rosen. So, we get another great Chick Stone inked issue. And so, we get the continued soap opera of the Marvel age. It's not like, oh, this is a new episode, and we're not going to reference the previous episode because we don't know if anybody actually, bought that issue or not who's reading this issue. So what's the point of referencing those loose ends? But, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee felt it was important, and I agree, to have sort of a connective tissue that goes through the entire story so that you're not, so that each segment doesn't just feel disposable, but that it's part of a larger pageant. And so Loki is chiding the Enchantress and the Executioner for failing to defeat Thor and hurt Jane Foster. He's chiding them as if he's their boss, which I didn't get that. He might think he's their boss, but you can tell by their body language and by what they're saying that they don't see it that way. That it was sort of an alliance, but that Loki's not their boss, but he definitely sees himself as such. And then we get this amazing drawing of Odin as, Lord of all he surveys, and Loki's, kind of creeping up on him. And it really makes me think of like the silent movies that Jack Kirby would have been watching as a child, these sort of, German expressionist films and whatnot. It's just got this mythic pageantry and amazing lighting, like very cinematic lighting, lit from below. Then you get this, really insane close-up. I mean, just so uniquely Kirby. And of course you think of that Roy Lichtenstein painting. This is I don't I think we've sort of identified the exact panel that he was lifting from, which would have been Magneto from X-Men #1, but this certainly Seems to have a lot in common with it too. He might have had a little collection of Jack Kirby extreme bulging eyeball close-ups, just insane detail. And you could say that some of the draftsmanship in it is possibly clumsy. I've seen other Kirby drawings that have this intensity, but just sort of work better. But again, the idiosyncratic quality of it, the fact that it's not quite on the money, is kind of fascinating too. Like I really do sort of find myself, sort of fascinated with this, kind of staring at it, and possibly it's the hypnotic effect of Odin's stare. But anyway, so Loki is sort of pushing Odin's buttons, and Odin's upset. The ongoing beef that Odin has with Thor is that Thor loves a mortal woman, and that this is just not allowed as far as Odin's concerned. It's a conflict of Thor's duties, and Loki loves it. And Jack Kirby had sort of thrown out this quote and didn't really elaborate on it, but that he sort of modeled the dynamic between Loki, Odin, and Thor. He sort of modeled it after Stan Lee as Loki, Odin as Martin Goodman, and Thor as Larry Lieber, which I thought was really interesting. I wish he would have gone into greater detail about that. But you get the sense that from Jack's perspective, Stan was kind of like sneaking around, trying to figure out ways to get in good with Martin Goodman so that he could possibly replace him. And that he was sort of jealous of his sort of more kind-hearted brother. Tried to make sure that Larry didn't get in too good with the boss because he might feel threatened by him. It's very interesting, very very compelling, very very juicy little tidbit that Jack threw out there. And so I love these knockout panels with like the two colors, red and yellow. Loki comes up with a plan where he says, Odin, why don't you go to Earth and settle things with Thor? And so Odin says, that's a great idea. I'll give you part of my power so you can run things in Asgard while I'm away, which was, pretty much Loki's plan. That was what he was hoping for. And now we're back again, more soap opera, more continuing drama, picking up from the previous issue. Jane is completely physically and emotionally drained from her encounter with the executioner and all the emotional turmoil that the Enchantress caused in her life and caused between her and Don Blake. He's there being supportive of her in the way she was supportive of him the previous issue. A nice little foreground on his microscope. So he tells Jane to take the rest of the day off, and in his thought balloons, he wants to hold her and tell her that he loves her, but he can't, at least not yet. And so he sends her home to rest, and now it's the calm before the storm. He's wondering what's going to be Loki's next move. What are the Enchantress and the Executioner going to do next? And so he transforms into Thor in a pretty similar to the previous issues, 3-panel transformation, hammer down. And so he flies off. And in New Gods Sunday School, I talked about how Jack Kirby had modeled Darkseid after Jack Palance. And I wonder if he modeled this thug after Jack Palance also. I see a resemblance there. And so I thought this was set up pretty nicely, that like, okay, Odin's coming to Earth, and then we have this substantial figure in shadow, walking, great body language. You can feel sort of the power, even though he's just, wearing ordinary clothes, and he gets attacked by these muggers. And then you see a close-up, and it's like, oh, it's Odin. It's Odin in his Earth attire. I think it's a pretty nice reveal. It plays out nicely, and this becomes a recurring motif throughout the series. They're kind of like Santa Claus in Miracle on 34th Street. And I really like this sequence with Loki. I really like the drawing of it. He's up in Asgard. He's king of heaven, and he's loving it, and he's looking down on the drama going down on Earth. And Kirby, great at drawing somebody sitting on a throne, and here's Loki on the throne in in sort of a position that I haven't seen before in any of these comics, where it's like he's got that sort of stance, sitting in this throne, but head thrown back, laughing, just delighted in the turn of events and how things have gone, where now he's sitting on the throne of Asgard. This is his dream come true. He is in ecstasy. But the ecstatic emotions can't last for long, because now he needs to cement his position there. And so he's going to send in some big guns, some heavy hitters. Storylines and characters and settings from Tales of Asgard are feeding into the main feature. And so Loki is using the powers of Odin, releasing the giant Skag from the Ring of Fire that Odin had put him in. He's releasing Surtur from the center of the earth where Odin had put him. And Heimdall's watching all of it, but he can't leave his post. So Balder is flying by, and he's going to get word to Thor about what Loki is planning.
Heimdall himself can't help because he can't move from his spot, but he sends Balder off to help Thor. And Balder mentions that he's riding one of Odin's winged horses, which we've also seen established in previous issues of Tales of Asgard. So we're just getting this collision of worlds of Earth, this sort Manhattan, this sort of superhero, and Asgard, and making Manhattan into sort of a superhero playground of the gods, a place where the gods will fight out their grudges, a theme Kirby will return to again and again. I love this panel, a beautifully rigorous drawing, and you have the full horse head to toe. Horses aren't the easiest thing to draw, and panel after panel, Kirby's drawing these medium shots of the horse where you can see the entire thing, where I think a lot of other artists might start sort of cropping the horse just to kind of, give yourself a break from having to do it again and again, but not Kirby. And then the icing on the cake in this panel is Thor's hand and hammer just ever so slightly, creeping into the frame, just enough to sort of set up the next panel where he throws his hammer and the hammer grabs the horse's bridle and leads him down. Just brilliant stuff. You don't see this level of invention and clarity in anybody else's comics, at the time or before. Kirby's time in animation, I feel, has really served him well. His comics have that quality to them, where there is a sense of continuous motion that you don't have to do as much resetting from panel to panel, that there really is like a nice flow of images. And it's just something about the way he draws, almost makes like the illusion of motion happen. This horse is just great, and conveying the urgency of everything that's going on. So Balder, tells Thor what he's in for, that the big bad guys are coming, so they get ready for action. Meanwhile, Odin goes to Jane Foster, and he says, "Look into my eyes." So I assume we haven't figured out quite exactly why he's on Earth. I don't think it's been said exactly why he's on Earth. But he says, "Look into my eyes." So you get the sense like, oh, he's about to hypnotize her to maybe make her forget about Thor, which comes up in later issues. But before he can do whatever he came there to do, Thor swoops into the window, kneels before Odin, and tells him about the big emergency that's coming up. That one of the storm giants, and worse yet, Surtur, the fire demon, are coming to attack the city. I love this panel, the body language, and then Kirby is great at making somebody look powerful just by their stance, and Odin certainly has that. And then the partial silhouette, that sort of chiaroscura, into darkness, is just really amazing. And I got to say, like, the printing process really makes this panel work. Like, I think the printing process of these old comics is really important for making their aesthetic work and making it all making it as good as it is. It's sort of an accident of technology and of the time, but I think it's a key part of what makes these comics so beautiful, and you lose it when you lose the newsprint and the printing technology. If you were to see a reprint of this panel, or if you were even to see the original art itself, this portion is just pure, just an area of pure 100% flat black. Because of the printing process, there's bits of white paper that are showing through where the ink didn't quite connect with the paper. And it just gives the image just such a depth that it wouldn't have had if it were, sort of the flat black as it was drawn on the paper. It makes a little bit of atmosphere, like a little bit of distance between the foreground and the background. It makes and again, it's just sort of an accident of the printing process, but it's beautiful and sort of like a restoration attempt on this page, which is one of the ways they sort of reprint old comics. A restoration attempt would completely eliminate that, unless it were like what I see as sort of the best way to reprint this stuff, which would be just as accurate a photograph as possible of this page. But I feel like those little speckles and little wispy clouds of white that are in there would be deliberately completely eliminated, and I think it's a mistake. I think it's why reprints of this material that aren't on newsprint or aren't treated with the right sensitivity just don't really connect. A new audience looks at it and is like, what's the fuss? This Kirby stuff doesn't look so great. Odin does another one of his things. He magically transports the entire human race to a safe other dimension while this battle's going on, so that they're like out of harm's way while this is all going on. And we'll see a similar panel in the Mangog story, much later in the series, which was like my entry point to the Thor comics. And it's a similar thing of Odin sort of having the power to move around an entire, planet full of people, wherever he needs them to go, he can make it happen. The other thing I want to note is that, like the Galactus story, it seemed like it was important to Jack and Stan that when they'd have these sort of, huge, like insane menaces like Galactus or like Surtur in the city, it seemed important to them that humanity have no memory of it, which is interesting to me. I'm not sure exactly why. I could make some guesses, possibly just the idea of wanting to keep these stories, before the idea of sort of comic book universes, kind of keep the idea that these stories take place in a world that's really pretty much the world we live in, that not much different, these stories take place right outside our window. And so, you could have different things happen that maybe people didn't see or could be explained away. But if you had, Surtur the fire demon show up in Manhattan, then, you could be like, well, that's very different from the world I live in, because I don't remember Surtur the fire demon ever, walking down, Broadway. And, If he was, it would be plastered all over the newspaper. So I cannot suspend my disbelief in this fictional universe. I'm guessing that was their thought, that they didn't want to, if something was really like earth-changing, they had to make sure that the general population has no memory of it. And so the same thing happens in the Galactus story. When Galactus comes to Earth, all record, Galactus erases all record, all photos of himself and his spaceship, and and erases like the memories of people that it happened. There's that possibility. I also think maybe it's some sort of larger kind of like biblical thing. Like, I think of, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, where, when they open up the Ark and it just like destroys every camera, before anything happens, every camera gets destroyed. So maybe it's this sort of idea, this biblical idea of like, God, wanting no proof of his existence, some larger thing that maybe, Kirby wasn't even, or Stan weren't even consciously aware of, just sort of like an intuitive storytelling stroke. This sort of Godzilla movie setup, King Kong, War of the Gargantuans. It's very cool. The storm giant, he's walking through the ocean, and he's emerging from the ocean. He's dripping, and look at this team that's coming to get him. That's coming to fight him. And great sort. When you have superheroes and gods and whatnot, you still want to find ways to make your heroes the underdog. So just the size difference alone makes it like like a David and Goliath. Like, man, how are they going to defeat this giant? And Balder flies up, smashes his club, really awesome. But then he's like, hey, that's no big deal. I can use it to mystically funnel water into a tornado and send it your way. So, it's a video game. We got 3 lives. Balder's been eliminated. Okay, we lost that. That guy's out of play. And now Thor's going to show what he can do. Surtur hurls a fireball at him, and it kind of, takes control of Thor's hammer for a minute and sends him into the ocean. Okay, that's 2 lives down. Now it's time for your 3rd life, and this one's super powered up. It's Odin, and he sends forth a spell that softens the ocean floor below the giant to make him sink into it, and so he's sinking and sinking. Now these lines coming off of Odin makes me think that maybe the original intent was that Odin is doing one of those sort of magnetic things that we've seen references to in multiple issues of magnetism sort of functioning in a way of just, being more than just magnetism, being sort of just a general, gravitic attraction, just making something, sticky, making something attract to something else. And possibly that's what's going on. Maybe Odin is increasing the gravity of the giant, or maybe he's increasing the quote unquote magnetism. But in any event, it's making him sink to the bottom of the ocean. Thor climbs out of the water. Balder helps him. Nice little moment there. Kind of reminiscent of Orion and Light Ray, which I think, with the idea of New Gods being almost like a continuation of Kirby's Thor comics, that sort of makes sense that those kind of that sort of friendship would be a continuing motif, and of Balder possibly being Balder seems Light Ray seems like a Balder type character, and obviously Orion seems like a Thor type character, even though the details of his birth are a little more complicated. Maybe Thor with a little bit of Loki thrown in. Surtur is helping the giant out. He's hardening the ground so he can jump out, climb out of it, jump out of it. And now, these two are teamed up. Great little panel there. And Surtur, he's hurling his flame around, turning himself into like a tornado of flame. And here's Surtur's plan. His plan is he's going to go to the, polar ice caps to melt them so that the waters flood the entire globe like they did at the dawn of time. I mean, how's that for a timely piece of the plot? I love this panel of the storm giant sort of, screaming with his beard flowing everywhere, in red and pink. Really nice image. For a second, I almost thought it was supposed to be Odin, because I've seen sort of Odin depicted that way. And then also there's Zeus and Zoras from the Eternals, who's got sort of that red flowing hair and this is one of those sort of godly poses. It also reminds me of Jack Kirby's drawing of Moses that he had hanging on the wall of his house. Between the two of them, this storm giant's creating this crazy storm that's rocking the city, and we sort of have this doomsday countdown of Surtur making his way towards the polar ice caps to melt them. And, Balder says, Thor, he headed for the frozen north, muttering that he would melt the polar ice caps. If he succeeds, Earth is doomed. There's your takeaway message from this comic. Jack Kirby's a smart guy. They're holding their own against the storm. Thor summons a lightning bolt. Really beautiful. I love the sort of comic book language of this. Very pop art, and sends it right, and we haven't seen anything quite like that in the series so far, and sends it right at the storm giant. This is an epic battle. This is the kind of stuff you go to a Thor comic for, is sort of an epic battle of the gods. Odin puts sort of a magical shield around the city because things are really going to get crazy, and he flies towards the storm giant, points his sword, and starts shooting some of his magic to drain away the power of the giant. But somehow the power keeps coming back, as it explains up here, because Loki is sort of the power behind the power. As Odin is drawing away power from the giant, Loki is feeding Odin power that he got from Odin back into the giant. So it's making the battle much harder than Odin thought it would be, but eventually he is drained, he collapses. And Odin collapses too from the effort. We're at sort of the final countdown. Surtur is about to get to the North Pole and melt the whole thing down, and completely destroy the Earth and make it uninhabitable for the human race. And really cool moment, Thor picks up his father's sword, sort of a motif in these kinds of stories. You think of King Arthur, with Uther Pendragon's sword. It's just sort of like a motif, of life in general. So he's got to carry on the fight, pick up the sword of his father, because Thor is the inheritor of the kingdom of Odin. He's one day all this will be his. And so he picks up the sword. Surtur is in full fire mode, about to melt the polar ice caps, and then for some reason he gets sent off course, pinned to this asteroid, magnetically or gravitically or magically. He's pinned to this asteroid and forced to roam space forever. A couple things about this. I mean, that's something we see in other Kirby comics of this era. Pretty famously, I think issue 6 of Fantastic Four, where it ends with Doctor Doom, sort of hanging on to an asteroid and just forced to live out the remainder of his days, wandering the depths of space on this asteroid. Now we get it here with Surtur. And then also, I mean, this prefigures Jack Kirby's panel from New Gods number 5 of the Promethean giant pinned to an asteroid. Maybe the greatest comics image of Jack Kirby's career. This huge double-page spread of this cyclopean alien giant pinned to this asteroid with like this amazing perspective on it and sense of scale, with tiny Metron of the New Gods sort of flying by. An image that made a huge impression on me, early in my Kirby fandom, and really, is seared into the brains of anybody who's seen it. So I feel like we're seeing the beginning of that here. And also, Kirby is now, he's not just reiterating these ancient myths, he's continuing them, he's adding to them, he's enriching them. Surtur, in the olden days, it made sense that to have the idea of Surtur being, in the center, in the furnace of the center of the earth. But, we're living in the space age, so now this demon that could bring about the end of the world, it now is imprisoned in space on an asteroid that's hurtling further and further from Earth. So we're safe, but we're only safe for now. If that asteroid somehow comes back, or if he's somehow liberated from that, we are fucked. Now, I don't think it's a really amazing development, but I don't think it was ever picked up on. We'll have to see as the series goes on, but If my memory serves, the next time we see Surtur, when he gets freed, he's not being freed from an asteroid. He's sort of being freed from the center of the Earth again. So just off the top of my head, I think that this wasn't picked up on. But if it were, that would be amazing. And hopefully I'm mistaken and it is picked up. But I don't believe so. Now, we get the explanation of how all that happened. Thor and Balder explained to Odin that while he was passed out, Thor used the power of Odin's magic sword, which contains, a fraction of Odin's power itself. He used it to do all this, to send Surtur into space and pin him to that asteroid. Great job, son. You have done well, my warriors. Great job. He gets the pat on the shoulder, and Odin, takes back his sword, gets on his horse, and Odin and Balder are gone, and the human race are returned to the Earth with no memory of what's taken place. Sort of like the end of Superman 2. Everybody's mind is erased. Don Blake returns to the office, and Jane Foster is like, "Yep, just another boring day at the office. Nothing to report." And now we're back at Asgard, and Loki is in big trouble, and he's getting banished to the kingdom of the trolls, where he will serve the trolls. And this is a recurring thing in the series. We'll see again and again. Loki getting in trouble, for his big, earth-shattering schemes, and being sent into exile, and eventually figuring a way out, or Odin finding some use for him, or Odin kind of just, forgetting what all the fuss was about and setting him free. We'll see it again and again. And now Odin sort of, contemplating the universe, contemplating the cosmic things that a god of war contemplates in his quiet moments. And a tease for next issue, that Thor will face an earthly menace. So we'll see what that is next time. And in the meantime, we've got a cool, Larry Lieber, Stan Lee, and Al Hartley story. Looks pretty interesting. Looks pretty lively. Al Hartley is, well and good, but I miss those crazy, Basil Wolverton inks that Larry Lieber had been getting in previous issues, but looks nice. And now we get Tales of Asgard, beginning a new dimension in comics, biographies in depth of Asgard's heroes. So everybody's getting a feature now of Thor's larger cast, and so we're getting the story of Heimdall. Again, Kirby's in a real horse mood. He's drawing some amazing horses, these kind of cool armored horses, a little bit olden days, a little bit science fiction. I like the way the tale's sort of tied up here. A Tale Told in Splendor by Stan Lee. A Drama Drawn in Glory by Jack Kirby. Again, Jack's the co-writer on here, even though the credits don't say so. Inked by Don Heck, and lettered by Art Simic. So we get the return of Don Heck on inking duties. Odin's referencing, an attack that just happened on Asgard. So maybe we're referring to the story from Tales of Asgard that I think was like 2 issues ago. Young Thor, picks up the hammer and fights against the enemies of Asgard. Or maybe this is some other attack that happened, between stories that we didn't get to see. But in any event, because Asgard is again and again under attack, and it's the job of the gods to defend it, and Thor and Odin in particular. They're cleaning up all the mess, all this repair work. Odin, tells Heimdall that he needs somebody to guard the Rainbow Bridge, because that's how these storm giants got to Asgard and trashed it, was through the Rainbow Bridge. So we can't leave it unguarded anymore. And now, in typical sort of, legend fashion or myth fashion, Odin's putting together a contest to find the new guardian of the Rainbow Bridge. And we have, 3 candidates, and each one has, a special ability, a special power that makes them, the right guy for the job. And Odin asks Agnar the Fierce, "Why do you think you should be chosen?" And he says that he has stronger lungs than anyone. If, something crazy happens, he'd be able to, get the word out. And the next guy, Gobatron, he sort of, poo-poos on that. But Agnar tells him, if there's an attack, he can blow into this Gjallar horn or whatever, this dragon horn. He can blow into it harder than anybody, and it'll scare away the bad guys, and it'll let people know in like the furthest corners of Asgard that the bridge is under attack. And then Gotron, tells his story of why he should be the guy. And Gotron says that his power is his nimbleness, that he can sort of, hop and skip and jump and fight, a number of giants all by himself with his skill. I guess sort of like maybe like Fandral the Dashing, sort of this swashbuckler who's light on his feet and can, gracefully dispatch a whole army, and nobody can get a hit in on him because he moves with such fluidity. They can't target him. And now Heimdall's going to give his explanation, and we're used to seeing Heimdall with this crazy helmet. He takes his helmet off. We get a look at the guy underneath the helmet, and it's sort of his power is sort of his sensitivity. So he's taking off his helmet. We're seeing a more vulnerable, a more sensitive version of the character, and he's showing that he can put his ear to the ground and he can hear or see or smell anything from great distances. That he sort of has like the most enhanced senses of any of the gods. And he says that he hears a plant growing in the heart of the hidden hills, and everybody's calling bullshit on that. He's just lying. And so Odin sends him to go check it out, and it's true. They're in the middle of this sort of scarred wasteland, burnt to a crisp by a dragon's breath. This entire area, nothing can grow there. But against all odds, miracle of miracle, there is a tiny plant growing there that Heimdall had heard. This imperceptible sound, a sound you couldn't even hear if you were right there. He heard it from far away. This miracle of this plant growing there. It's brought back to Odin, and it's true. Nothing can escape the scanning eyes of Heimdall. We get another one of those extreme Kirby close-ups where you can't even fit both eyes fully into the frame at the same time. Just great stuff. A signature of Kirby's style. A way it's a Kirby comic. This is a really great moment, and it's just a great moment in itself. It would be interesting if this plant ended up being, one of the plants or one of the trees or something that figures into like the larger mythology, the larger story. Maybe the plant that becomes mankind, or maybe the tree that grows the golden apples. I'm just throwing ideas out there, but it would be kind of cool if this, plays some role later in the series. But even just as it is, it's pretty cool. And so now we flash forward, and now an army of Asgardians are sent out on a mission because of something that Heimdall saw from a distance. They're a little bit in disbelief, but hey, let's check it out. Again, your words have borne the ring of truth, Heimdall. Your warning has saved Asgard from a dangerous attack, and I dub thee Sir Heimdall. Now, this sort of knighting ceremony. Hal Foster's Prince Valiant is certainly one of the influences on Tales of Asgard, and we get a moment that's sort of straight out of there. And I dub thee Sir Heimdall. Now he is, this is Odin's making it official. Heimdall, you are the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge now and forever. And here he stands, as he always will. And just like another great element of the myths themselves, but also of Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's sort of comic book version, which is a great work in and of itself. And we're teasing for next issue the story of the time Heimdall failed. So that's a really cool twist, a really cool development. I hope you'll check it out with me next time. I'm Tom Scioli, author of I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design. I'll see you next Thursday.